They say a wolf is only as strong as the pack that claims her. She had heard it since she could walk. The elders said it at ceremony dinners, the alpha said it in speeches, and even Brielle managed it occasionally when she needed something to feel superior about. The pack is everything. The pack decides. The pack knows. The pack, as of this particular morning, had decided that Kaiya Summers deserved the bruise along her jaw for dropping a plate 2 nights ago. She made the pancakes anyway. It was her 18th birthday. Nobody had said so yet, not Brielle, who had come downstairs and rammed her shoulder in the doorway without looking up, and not Percy, who had not come downstairs at all. She had stopped expecting anyone to say it around the time she was 11. That was also around the time she stopped expecting a great many things. But she knew the date. At 18, you shifted for the first time. At 18, the mate bond arrived. A scent, a pull, a recognition the whole pack spoke about like it was something you caught and not something that happened to you. At 18, the pack decided what you were. She cracked 2 eggs. The yolks held. Small victories. The bruise along her jaw ached in time with her heartbeat, low and steady, a fact she had been carrying so long it had mostly become background noise. She poured the batter. The kitchen smelled like smoke and sugar, and nobody was going to thank her for it. Then the mind link fired through every skull in the territory at once. The alpha's voice, formal and clear. The annual mating ceremony would begin at noon. All blood moon wolves to the great hall. And then, quiet at the end, careful, the alpha king of White Crescent had honoured their ceremony with his attendants. The pack house above her came alive. She heard Brielle drop something. She heard Percy say a word she could not make out through the ceiling. She heard doors. She heard the particular urgency of a family who had suddenly remembered they owned good clothes. Her family had not spoken to her since Tuesday. They managed to find their good clothes for a king. She stood at the stove a moment longer. Then she put the plate on the counter, where Brielle would take it without thanking her. She had never been chosen for anything. She saw no reason today would be different. The great hall held 200 wolves, and every one of them was dressed better than she was. She had worn the one dark dress she owned. It was clean. It was not fine. The women were in deep colours. The men wore structured jackets. Everyone had their rank marks and family crests and the particular confidence of people who had always been allowed to take up space. She might as well have worn a sign. She stood near the back. Brielle had moved to the second row without saying anything. Percy was somewhere near the left wall, close enough to Zach's friends that the association was clear. She did not look for them. She watched the torches instead, and the high arched windows throwing rectangles of cold noon light across the stone floor, and the council elders settling into their carved chairs with the unhurried weight of men who had been settling into important chairs for decades. The ceremony had a specific shape. The blood moon alpha would speak. The unmated wolves of age would present themselves. The mate bond would arrive, or it would not. If it arrived, you said so. If it did not, you waited another year. She had not expected it to arrive. She had mostly accepted this. Then the scent hit her. It came from across the room, something she had no name for yet, something cedar dark and winter clean, a scent that moved through her chest before she had decided to notice it, and sat there like a fact. Her stomach dropped. Her hands tightened at her sides. She followed it, unwilling, and found Zach Moon, the alpha's son, the tallest person in the room, the boy who had put her lunch tray on the floor 3 separate times in the past year and watched her pick it up. Her stomach dropped again, further, and did not come back up. He had already seen her. He was already moving. She did not move. There was nowhere to move to. 200 wolves were watching, and her feet had made a decision her brain had not caught up with yet, which was to stand very still and not make any sound that could be mistaken for begging. He crossed the room and grabbed her by the hair. Her chest cracked. Not dramatically. It cracked the way ice cracks when the temperature finally changes, clean and quiet, and suddenly. Her throat locked. Her hands clenched at her sides. He said it loud enough for the council to hear. "You are weak and pathetic. You can't be my Luna." 200 wolves held their breath. She could feel their attention on the back of her neck, on her hands, on the way she was holding herself. She could feel Brielle in the second row not intervening. She could feel Percy near the left wall not moving. She did not look at any of them. She looked at Zach. She had thought, once, that this moment, if it came, would break her open completely. She had imagined something violent, something that couldn't be contained. But what actually happened was much simpler than that. The weight of it landed in her chest all at once. Her body did the only thing it had ever been good at. It held. Zach's hand fell from her hair. He stepped back. He said the formal words. I, Zach Moon, reject you, Kaiya Summers, as my mate and Luna. His jaw was set. His eyes were somewhere slightly past her left ear. You'll never be anything but a runt. 200 wolves in silence. She had never been chosen for anything. She knew that. What she did not know until this exact moment was that not being chosen still felt like this. She was standing on the stone floor with her chest cracked clean in two, and it felt like being told something about yourself that you had believed for so long you forgot anyone had to say it out loud. She breathed once. She said it flat and clear and without waver, because she was not going to give him the sound of her breaking. I, Kaiya Summers, accept your rejection. She looked at him then, directly, for the first time, and held his gaze for one full second. Goodbye, Zach. I hope it was worth it. She turned. She walked toward the door. The hall was still silent. She heard 200 people not speaking. She heard Brielle's silence specifically, which was a different texture than the others, satisfied and watching. She heard Percy's silence, which was just absence. She did not look back. Halfway to the door, something made her eyes move to the far wall. She did not decide to look. Her gaze went there on its own, and there, against the back of the hall where the tall man had been standing when she came in, stood the Alpha King of White Crescent. He had not moved. He had not looked away once. She was walking fast, not running. Running would have meant something was chasing her, and she was not willing to give Zach Moon or his pack or any witness remaining in that hall the satisfaction of believing anything was chasing her. She was simply walking, and she was walking fast, and she was going to cross the border and become a rogue and figure out the rest of it after that. The pack bond still hummed against the back of her skull like a sound she had always heard, and therefore mostly stopped noticing. It would go quiet when she crossed. She had thought, once or twice, that she would be afraid of that silence. Standing here, moving fast toward the tree line with her chest cracked open and her throat still locked from not crying, she found she was only looking forward to it. She heard footsteps behind her. She did not turn. She had no interest in whatever Brielle wanted to say. She had no interest in Percy's guilt, which was probably just barely arriving now that there was an audience for it. She kept walking. The footsteps did not belong to either of them. They were longer spaced, unhurried, covering ground without effort. She stopped. The Alpha King of White Crescent stopped about 3 feet behind her. She turned. He looked the same as he had from across the hall. Tall, composed, grey eyes doing the arithmetic of whatever problem he was currently solving. Up close he was larger than she had thought, and older. 26 or 27, she guessed. He had dark circles under his eyes that you could only see in direct light. He looked at her for a moment. Then he said, "You're going the wrong way if you're trying to disappear." She blinked. It was not what she had expected. She said, "I'm not trying to disappear. I'm leaving. Into rogue territory. Into my own life. There's a difference." He looked at her like he was reading something. Not her face, her posture, the way she was holding herself. He said, "I saw what happened. Then you saw me handle it. I saw you hold very still," he said, "while someone who should have known better made a public mistake. That isn't the same thing." Her chest did something that was not the crack from before. It was smaller, sharper, in a different place, like something pressing on a bruise she did not know was there. She started walking again. He walked beside her. They reached the border. She could feel the exact line of it, the place where the Blood Moon Pack's territory ended and everything else began. Her wolf knew it. The bond would sever at this point, quick and clean. She had heard it hurt. She squared her feet on the edge of it. He stopped beside her. The Blood Moon Alpha appeared from the packhouse path. Someone had told him. Someone had run fast. He was older than she had thought he would look in person, and deeply unhappy. He addressed the Alpha King of White Crescent as if she were not standing 3 feet away. The girl was a pack member. She would need to come back. There were procedures. There were. "She is under my protection," Darren said. His voice did not change. It was the same voice, but the Blood Moon Alpha went quiet. "If anyone touches her, that is a declaration of war against White Crescent." He looked at the other man for exactly long enough. Then he did not look at him again. She was staring at him. She could not help it. He turned to her. She was trying to decide if she should tell him she did not need his protection, which was true, but beside the point now, when she caught the edge of something against the ground and her ankle turned. His hand closed around her arm before he had decided to do it. She felt that clearly. He had not decided to do it. His hand was simply there, fingers wrapping around the inside of her elbow, steadying her before he had even thought to move. 3 seconds. The white diamond marking on her nose burned. Not painfully, not at all like anything she had felt before. Something warm and silver and bright, burning right there in that exact spot, as if someone had pressed a lit match to the marking and the flame had found something it recognized. Her spine lit up cold and then warm. Her chest went tight in a completely different way than it had been tight for the last half hour. He felt something too. She saw it in the way his jaw set, careful, deliberate, the jaw of a man who has felt something he was not expecting and has decided not to react to it yet. 3 seconds. He let go. He looked at his own hand briefly. Then he looked at her. "Come with me," he said. Not a question. She looked at his hand. She looked at the border ahead of her, the silence waiting on the other side, the rogue territory, the freedom and the nothing. She went with him. The pack house was nothing like she expected. It was large and warm, and the floors did not creak in the particular way that meant someone was coming. Juliana, the Alpha King's sister, who arrived at the front door before Kaiya had finished looking at the outside of the building, had the grey eyes and the dark hair and none of the stillness. She moved through the house like she had been waiting for something to organize, and Kaiya had finally given her a reason. "I only have an hour, so just shush and let me find you something to wear." Kaiya looked down at the dark ceremony dress. "I'm wearing something." "You're wearing what you had? That's different." She was already moving through a wardrobe. "Why do you have so much hair?" It was not a question. Kaiya decided the safest response was to stand still and let her work. The room she was given had a window that looked over the west side of the territory. The bed had more pillows than she had ever owned in total. The bathroom had hot water that came from the tap immediately, which she had known was a technology that existed but had not personally experienced. She took a shower. She changed into borrowed clothes. She stood in front of the mirror for a moment and looked at the person looking back at her, who was herself, who had a bruise along her jaw and new clothes, and the faint ghost of a burning sensation on the nose that had not entirely gone away. He was in his office when she found him, books on every surface and maps and a desk that looked like someone worked at it seriously. He looked up when she appeared in the doorway. She said she wanted to thank him. He said, "Don't thank me." She stopped. "You deserve so much more than the life you were given," he said. "Don't thank me for a minimum." She had not been spoken to this way before, not by someone who meant it without needing something from her. She did not know what to do with it, and so she stood in the doorway and said nothing, which was the only socially safe response she could think of. "Go eat something," he said. "Juliana made too much." She went. She ate. It tasted like food that had been made by someone who wanted it to taste good. She had not realized until now that food could come that way. That night, she was getting ready for bed, moving down the hallway in a borrowed shirt, when she passed his door and heard him still in the office, the creak of the chair, the quiet. She almost knocked. She did not know why she almost knocked. She kept walking. Later, she heard him in the hallway. She heard him stop outside her door for a moment before his footsteps continued. She did not call out. She had a nightmare. She had been having them since she was 3 years old, and they had a specific shape, a rogue attack, her mother's voice, and then silence that lasted the rest of the dream. She woke up and sat in the dark for a moment, waiting for the unfamiliarity of the room to resolve into something she recognized. She was in White Crescent. She was safe. Her chest was tight and her throat was burning, but that was the nightmare and not the present, and she knew how to do this. She had been doing this for 15 years. She was getting water from the bathroom when she heard him in the hall. He was not supposed to be awake. It was past midnight. She opened the door. He was standing there in the dark with a glass of water himself, which was almost funny, and they looked at each other for a moment in the way people look at each other when they have both been caught doing something human. He started to speak. She started to speak. They stopped. She held up her glass. He held up his. She almost laughed. She did not laugh, but it was closer than she had come in a long time. "Get some sleep," he said. "You too," she said. She went back into her room. She heard him stand in the hall for another moment before he moved on. She lay down in the dark with the water beside her, and the unfamiliar ceiling overhead, and something in her chest that was not the crack from before, not the burning from the border, but something smaller and more dangerous, something like wanting to knock on a door. She closed her eyes. The nightmare did not come back. For the first time since she was 3 years old, she fell asleep without listening for footsteps. 1 week in, she had learned the pack house layout, the kitchen schedule, where Juliana kept the good coffee, and how to avoid the third step on the left staircase, which creaked like an accusation. She had learned that Darren's pack ran together at dusk on Tuesdays. Nobody had told her to come. Nobody had told her not to. She had found herself at the edge of the clearing at dusk on Tuesday, simply because staying behind felt like the wrong kind of deliberate. She shifted. It still hurt. She suspected it would always hurt. The bones moving, the world going sharp and vast and different. But she had done it twice now, and the second time was at least a pain she recognized. She landed on 4 feet, and the clearing went bright with wolf scent and the rich blue dark of early evening, and the pack moved around her, and nobody said anything about her being there. Then she heard them go still. She was not looking at herself. She did not think to. She was watching a rabbit at the far edge of the tree line and cataloguing new information about the way her nose worked. It was Hunter who shifted back first, she learned later from Juliana, who said something too quiet for her to catch from where she was standing. Darren was watching her. She could feel it before she turned, his gaze from across the clearing, the weight of it, the quality of attention she had learned to recognize in 1 week without intending to. She looked back at him. He was not smiling. He was looking at her wolf the way someone looks at something they have been expecting and are not sure how to feel about now that it has arrived. He pulled out his phone. An hour later, Elder Kane's car pulled up the drive. Elder Kane was old in the way that a stone is old, not frail, just settled. He sat across from her at the desk and folded his hands, and she had the distinct impression that whatever he was about to say, he had been waiting to say it for a very long time. She looked at Darren. Darren looked at the fireplace. Elder Kane said, "The white diamond on a wolf's nose is the mark of the moon goddess's chosen bloodline. It appears once in each generation, carried by the wolf who will either make peace before the hunter's war or end it." He paused. "You are the chosen one." She waited for him to say he was joking. He did not say he was joking. He did not look like someone who joked. "That can't be me," she said. "Put your hand on his." She looked at Darren. Darren extended his hand across the desk. He did not explain why. She looked at his hand for a moment. Then she put her palm on his. The diamond blazed. It was not like the border, not the careful 3-second warmth of something deciding whether to trust. This was the full arrival of whatever the border had been the beginning of, bright and silver and hot and absolutely certain, a recognition so total it felt like something finally clicking into place after 18 years of being wrong. Her own hands glowed faintly at the edges. Darren's breath came in quick, one sound, involuntary. Elder Kane said, "2 truths. You are the chosen one, and he is your true fated mate. The bond you felt at the ceremony was a shadow. Your power was suppressed, and the bond could not complete. Zach Moon was never your mate. This is." The room went very quiet. Her self-image was doing something complicated. The part of her that had been the runt of Blood Moon Pack for 18 years was having a very difficult conversation with the part of her that was apparently a prophesied savior with the correct fated mate. Neither part was winning. "I'm nobody," she said. "You have been told that," Elder Kane said. He did not say it unkindly. "It is not the same thing." She sat with that for a moment. Then she said, "You said suppressed. My power was suppressed. Your mother carried this bloodline. The hunters targeted her specifically, not a rogue attack, but a directed hunt. They have been targeting this bloodline for 3 generations, fearing what it can do. Your father did not know. The pack did not know. But the hunters knew, and they were afraid of you before you were born." He paused. "Your mother did not die because you were weak, Kaiya. She died because you were important." Her throat locked. Her eyes burned. She was not going to cry in front of Elder Cain. He had the look of a man who had sat across from many people who cried and was fully prepared to wait it out. But she was also not going to cry alone in her room later, where nobody could see her, because she had been doing that for 15 years and she was tired. Her knees gave slightly. She caught herself. She sat up straight. "All right," she said. Darren's hand was still warm from the glow. She was still holding his. Neither of them had moved to change that. "All right," she said again, and meant it differently the second time. She woke at 2 in the morning to a dream that was not a dream. It had no location. It had light, pale and total, the kind that comes from nowhere and everywhere, and a woman standing in it, who was tall and white-haired and wearing something white, and whose eyes were the pale blue of her own eyes in a mirror, which was strange and disorienting in the way very real things sometimes are. The woman said, "My child." She said, "I'm awake." "Yes," the woman said, and then, "The hunters are coming. They will arrive in 4 months' time. Be prepared. They plan to find a way to take your place and rule the supernatural world with wolves as their slaves." She heard a sound come out of her mouth that was not a word. "When you wake," the woman said, "you will find you can do things no other wolf can do. Use them wisely, and do not do this alone." She paused. "You have never had to do things alone. You were simply not given a pack that understood the difference between claiming someone and belonging to them." Then she was gone, and the room was dark, and Kaiya was sitting up in bed with her hands glowing faintly in the dark, and her heart hammering against her ribs so hard she could feel it in her palms. 4 months. She did not think about it. She got up and went to find Darren. He was already awake. She would learn over time that he was often already awake, that he slept in short intervals and spent a great deal of the dark hours doing paperwork in the study, the way people manage themselves when something is always running at the back of their mind. The lamp on the desk made his face strange and close. She sat in the chair across from him and told him everything. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, 4 months. 4 months, she said. A beat. Then we start tomorrow, he said. She looked at him. She was trying to determine if she should feel relieved or terrified, or some third thing that didn't have a name yet. She mostly felt the warmth in her hands from the glow that had not entirely faded, and the weight of the clock that had started without asking her permission. "She said I would find I can do things," Kaiya said. "I don't know what things." "We'll find out," he said. The certainty in it was so complete that it landed before she could argue with it. Together. She looked at her hands. The glow was almost gone now, just the faintest warmth at the edges of her fingers. She should go back to her room and try to sleep. She should be practical about this. She should not sit in his study at 4 in the morning until the sun came up, because he was the only stable thing in a week that had overturned everything. She stayed. He made tea and did not comment on her staying. He gave her a mug and went back to his paperwork, and they sat in the study while the sky lightened from black to grey to the particular rose gold of early morning, and she did not say anything else for a very long time, and neither did he, and it was the first time she had understood the specific mercy of not having to. Training was going well, which she distrusted on principle. 6 weeks into the 4-month countdown, and the pack was sharpening into something she could feel when she stood in the middle of them. A collective readiness, a sharpening at the edges that had not been there before. She had split the training. Boys with Hunter, girls with Juliana, herself and Darren on the powers. Every morning, the clearing. Every afternoon, she worked on control. Force field, she had found, came easily. Instinct more than technique. A bubble of something that pushed outward from her center when she needed it badly enough. Telekinesis was harder and more satisfying. The particular pleasure of a skill that felt impossible until it didn't, of throwing her attention at something heavy and feeling it yield. She was practicing both simultaneously one morning, holding a field around Hunter while throwing practice targets with her other hand, When Darren distracted her by throwing a stick at her leg, she dropped both. "You need to be able to concentrate through everything," he said, "because they're going to try to stop you." She picked up the stick and threw it back. He caught it. He did not look sad about this. He looked sad about something else. "I know," she said. She threw 2 more targets and held the field. Right. She was fine. This was absolutely fine. Then Zack arrived. He came with 7 of his wolves and a legal argument she had not expected. The argument was this: under certain provisions of old Blood Moon pack law, a rejection could be challenged as incomplete if the rejected wolf had not formally severed the bond at a pack house ceremony. She had crossed the border alone, not through ceremony. Therefore, Zack's position was the rejection had not been fully executed. She was not a lawyer. She was fairly certain this was complete nonsense. She was also fairly certain that Darren, who had listened to the argument with the expression of a man who had heard nonsense before and had developed very good patience for it, agreed with her assessment. Darren said, "The rejection was witnessed by 200 Blood Moon wolves, the pack council, and a sitting alpha king. If you would like to contest it further, I recommend a different legal argument." Zack's jaw worked. He said, "I made a huge mistake. I love you, and I want you back." This was addressed to Kaiya, who had positioned herself next to Darren's left shoulder with her arms crossed, the exact posture of someone who had already made a decision and was waiting for the other person to catch up. She said, "No." He said more things. She did not continue engaging with the things. Darren walked them to the gate and she went back to training, which was the most diplomatic response available to her, and she was being very disciplined about it. The next morning, Brielle was there. She had come separately on her own, without Zack, which was in some ways worse. She had a bag and an expression of sisterly concern so well practiced it might have convinced someone who had not grown up in the same house. She told Kaiya she was worried. She told Kaiya it was wonderful that she'd found somewhere safe. She told Kaiya she just wanted to be there for her. She moved into the second guest room while Kaiya was deciding how to object. Wonderful. This was going great. She found Hunter on the forest path 3 days later, sitting on a fallen tree with his elbows on his knees and his eyes at the ground, and she did not need to ask him anything to know that something had happened. She sat beside him. He said, "I found my mate." He did not say it like good news. She said, "Who?" He said, "Brielle." She sat with that for a moment. The forest was quiet. A bird in the canopy above them did something irrelevant to their situation. "She rejected you," Kaiya said, before I could say anything. His voice was even. The evenness of it was the tell. Hunter's voice in its natural state was warm. This was the sound of someone maintaining something very deliberately. Said I wasn't her type. Her chest pulled. She knew what the pulling felt like. She knew exactly what it felt like, and knowing it didn't make it easier to watch. What Hunter needed right now was not her anger. She could do that later, in a different room. He needed something else. She put her arm around his shoulders. He was much larger than her, and the gesture was somewhat logistically awkward, and neither of them mentioned it. "I know it hurts," she said. "Trust me, but it'll get better. I promise it does." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "I've seen you in a lot of situations. You've handled them well. I'm not sure this is the same category." "It isn't," she agreed. "It's worse. It gets better anyway." He breathed out slowly. "Sometimes it's best to recover and remember," he said, "not forgive and forget." She did not know where that had come from, whether someone had told him once, or whether he had worked it out himself. But she was going to be holding on to it for a long time. "I'm not forgiving any of this," she said. "I know. That's not what I said." They sat on the fallen tree for another few minutes. Then they went back to training. She came back from an evening run and found the door open. Darren's door, the one that was always closed. She heard Brielle's voice, something low and deliberate, the tone she had heard 100 times before, the tone that always came with a plan she wasn't going to like. She stood in the hallway for a fraction of a second longer than she needed to, which was the fraction where she understood what she was about to see, and then she pushed the door open the rest of the way. Brielle was wearing a robe, nothing else that she could see. She had her hands on Darren's chest and her face tilted up toward his, and she was saying something about tension, and she had clearly just kissed him, because his face had the particular expression of a man who has been caught in something he had no intention of being in. He stepped back the instant the door opened. Brielle looked at Kaiya. She smiled. Her chest didn't crack this time. Something colder and more specific happened, a narrowing, a precision, the way things go very clear and very focused when the anger is large enough to be useful instead of just large. She walked into the room. She took Brielle's arm. She walked her into the hallway. She said, "You are not my sister. You never have been, and you never will be." She kept her voice even. She kept her face even. She was aware, distantly, of how very much she wanted to not keep these things even, and she was doing it anyway. "I have my family, and it is not you," Brielle said. "He could have stopped me at any time." "I know he did," Kaiya said. "That's the only reason you're still standing." She closed the door. Hunter was in the corridor, watching. She looked at him. He looked at the closed door. He said nothing, because he understood exactly what the relationship between Brielle and Kaiya's current composure was, and what it would cost both of them if Kaiya made a different choice. She turned and walked down the corridor, and did not look back. She found the basket at the edge of the border path on a Wednesday afternoon, when she was running the perimeter. She heard the baby before she saw her, a small sound, the particular sound of someone very young doing their best not to panic, which Kaiya recognized in the specific way that a person recognizes something they have spent a lot of time doing themselves. She came around the curve in the path and stopped. The basket was plain. The woman beside it was not alive. Kaiya did not move toward either of them immediately. She assessed. Hunter had been 10 seconds behind her on the run. She heard him slow as he came around the curve and saw what she was seeing. There were 2 notes in the basket. She read the one on top first. A woman named Liliana had written it. She had known the hunters were coming. She had run as far as she could, and it had not been far enough. Her daughter was 5 months old. Her name was Adriana. Please, take care of her. The second note she turned over and did not read out loud. It was addressed to her by name. She folded it and put it in her pocket for later. She picked up the baby. Adriana looked at her with wide blue-grey eyes and a serious expression, and then grabbed a fistful of Kaiya's hair and held on. "Hello," Kaiya said. Adriana said nothing. She held on. Darren arrived 4 minutes later because Hunter had mind-linked him. He came around the curve and saw the basket and the dead woman and Kaiya standing in the path with a baby attached to her hair, and he stopped. He reached over to try to help disengage the fist. Adriana, making her loyalties clear on day 1, grabbed his thumb instead. He looked at the thumb. He looked at the baby. He looked at Kaiya. "I'm calling her Addie," Kaiya said. He said nothing for a moment. Then, "All right." "We're keeping her." "All right," he said again. Same voice, same certainty that preceded actual decisions. He moved to stand beside her, and they walked back to the pack house with a baby between them, who had not released either of them, and it was the first time Kaiya had walked anywhere feeling like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. 8 weeks in. The hunters came early. They came while she was in the training clearing correcting someone's stance, and they came from the east, which was not where they had been watching, and they came 150 of them out of the tree line with silver bullets and fire, and the particular coordinated intelligence of people who had done this before. She had gotten 37 wolves behind the force field before the bullet caught her right side. She called for Darren through the mind link. That was the last thing she remembered clearly before the world went away. She woke up 14 days later. The room was bright and smelled of antiseptic, and had a chair beside the bed that someone had been living in for a very long time. Darren was in the chair, head on the edge of the mattress, asleep in the way of someone who had finally stopped fighting it. She could see from where she was lying that he had not shaved in 2 weeks. His hands were folded near her arm. They looked like hands that had reached for her in the dark over and over, and found nothing. She put her hand on his. He woke up. He looked at her for 1 full second, and then his exhale was the sound of 2 weeks held in one breath released all at once, and he said, "Never do that again. I missed you so much. Longest 2 weeks of my life." She said, "I'll try." "No." He said it like he knew she was going to say that. "I mean it, Kaiya." His jaw was tight in the way it went tight when something was true, and he was trying to decide how true to let it be out loud. He held her hand and looked at her and said, "I can't lose you. If I do, I'll lose myself." Her chest went warm in the specific way it went warm for him. Not the crack, not the burning, but the long, settling warmth of something that had been holding on a long time, finding what it was holding on for. She looked at him for a long moment. She said, 7. He went very still. "How many?" she said. Not a question. 7, he said. "Blood moon wolves. Nobody from ours." He paused. "A hunter was carrying you away when I arrived. I stopped him." She breathed. "I'll always come back for you, Kaiya," he said. She said, "I know." And she meant it the way you mean something after you have watched someone prove it with their whole body over and over for weeks. That kind of knowing, the truest kind. She sat with her hand in his for a while. Then she said, "Marry me." He blinked. "Don't argue," she said. He said, "I wasn't going to argue." "Good," she said. They sat in the hospital room for another hour before the nurse asked them to leave. Kaiya walked out on her own, which took considerable effort, and she did not mention the effort. Darren walked beside her and did not mention that he noticed the effort. The moon goddess came at 2 a.m. again. This time there was no warmth in it. The light was the same, total and pale and sourceless, but the woman standing in it had an urgency she had not carried before. "My child," she said, "I have brought you here to warn you. There is a traitor among you." Kaiya said, "I know." She did not yet, but something in her had known for a while. The moon goddess said, "Zach Moon has been feeding your location and schedule to the hunters since he arrived. He told them when to come early. He is the reason you lost 7 wolves." The warmth from the hospital room, the specific settling warmth of Darren's hand, went cold. "You cannot kill your first mate," the moon goddess said, "but you do not have to wait for him to decide when this ends. Use the knowledge, use it to your advantage. Do not let your hatred of him make you stupid." Then the light was gone. Kaiya sat in the dark of her room with her hands faintly glowing and her chest stone still, not afraid, not even angry yet, something colder and more focused than either. She thought about the hunters arriving early. She thought about 7 wolves. She thought about a hunter carrying her away, and Darren killing him. She got up and went to the kitchen. She opened the envelope she had found in the basket with Addie, and had not read until now. She read it once. She read it again. Signed Alaric. "We know where the chosen one sleeps. We know what she loves. When she is ours, your king dies." She folded the letter. She stood at the kitchen table for a long time in the dark. Then she went to Darren's study. He was at his desk. He was always at his desk, when something was running at the back of his mind. She put the letter on the desk in front of him. He read it. His jaw tightened, which meant the thing he wanted to say was something he was deciding not to say, which was also how she knew he was afraid. She told him about Zach, about the moon goddess, about the timeline. He was very still. "We don't wait," she said. "We go to them first. Tonight." He looked at her. He said, "Are you sure?" She had been thinking about this in the kitchen for 20 minutes. She had thought about 7 dead wolves and a hunter carrying her unconscious across the clearing, and Darren's hands in the chair beside the hospital bed. She had thought about the 4 months that had become no months. She had thought about Addie asleep in the next room over, and what it meant that someone had read the notes in that basket. She said, "I have been waiting to be destroyed my entire life. I'm done waiting." He looked at her for a long moment. His eyes were the grey they always were, cold at first, and then, when she watched long enough, which she had learned to do, not cold at all. "We go east," he said. "From the east," she said. "At night. He'll tell them we're coming from the west at dawn. Let him think he delivered something." Hunter appeared in the doorway. Neither of them had called him. He looked at them and at the map on the desk and made the correct assessment. "Tonight," Kaiya said. He nodded. He turned to go make the calls. She put both hands flat on the desk and looked at the map. The territory was marked in red where the hunters had come from last time, and she traced the lines of the east approach with her finger, and for the first time in as long as she could remember, the anger felt like a tool instead of a wound. The night before the strike was clear and cold and very still. She was running the south perimeter with Hunter when she heard them, not many, 6 by the scent, moving through the gap in the fence line that they had not finished reinforcing after the first attack. A probe, advanced scouts, determining whether the main force had left anything behind. She signaled Hunter. He went wide to come in from the east side. She raised the force field around him first, instinct before calculation. Then she turned her attention to the fence line and the 6 shapes moving through the dark. Telekinesis had stopped feeling like reaching. It felt like something she already owned now, something that had always been there and had only recently agreed to be useful. She found the first Hunter and sent him into the second, found the third and fourth together and lifted them both at once, which was new, which she noted for later. The 5th and 6th split and went for the tree line. Then the 7th one came from the blind spot. She had not felt him because he had been downwind and he was very fast, and he had already grabbed one of her trainees, a boy of 17 who was patrolling his section of the perimeter exactly as she had told him to, and had a weapon pressed against the back of his neck. "Tell your people to stand down," the Hunter said, "or the boy is dead." She looked at the Hunter. She looked at the boy, who was very still and very frightened, and looking at her with the specific expression of someone trying not to make any sudden movements. Her palms burned. Not the way the diamond had burned, not the way the bond had burned. This was heat from the inside out, a pressure building in both hands simultaneously. Something that had been waiting behind her ribs since the moon goddess told her she would find things she could do. She had been carrying that promise ever since. She just hadn't known where it lived. It lived in her palms. She held them up. The fire came. Not a wildfire, not a wall, not a blanket, not anything she had decided on in advance. A directed column of orange gold, bright and hot, and controlled in the way that surprised her most, aimed at the space between the Hunter and the boy. The Hunter flinched. His grip loosened. The boy dropped and scrambled back. She stepped forward with both hands bright and said, flat, quiet, the voice she used for things she meant, "Leave, now, or I stop being careful." The Hunter looked at her hands. He looked at the fire that was not touching him, but was very close to touching him, and was clearly not interested in the distance. He went. She waited until she heard the others following. She waited until the perimeter was quiet. She waited until she was sure. Then she lowered her hands. They were still warm. She turned them over, palms up, the glow fading. No burns, not even heat on the outside. She looked at them the way you look at something that has always been yours and that you have just met for the first time. Hunter stepped out of the tree line. He was looking at her with an expression she did not have a name for. It was not fear, and it was not surprise. It was recognition. He said, "She's not the girl who ran. She's what we've been waiting for." He was not talking to her. He was talking to the dark, to the trees, to the 7 hunters who were somewhere in the darkness heading back to their compound, without what they had come for. She heard him anyway. Darren was at the desk when she came in. He looked up and registered her face, and then registered Hunter 3 steps behind her with the expression, and he was already crossing the room before she had said anything. He held her face in both hands. He was checking her. Individual check. Eyes, the temple, the jaw, the diamond marking on her nose. She was not burned anywhere. His thumbs were warm where they pressed along her cheekbones. He looked at her for a moment. He let his hands stay. She stood very still in his study in the middle of the night, with the fire cooling in her hands, and the clock running in the back of her mind, and the map of the Hunter compound spread out behind him on the desk. And she thought, "I am so much more than just a runt. I always was." The thought did not arrive dramatically. It did not announce itself. It simply settled, the way things settle when they are true, when they have been true for a long time, and are only now being allowed to take up the space they deserved. She had been trying to prove something since she was 3 years old. Standing here with his hands on her face, and Hunter in the doorway, and Addie asleep upstairs and the fire still warm in her palms. She was not trying to prove anything. She was not going to try any more. She was just herself. She had always been just herself. It was going to have to be enough. And it was. And it had been. And she was done arguing with it. "The probe is handled," she said. "I know." He had felt it through the pack link. His eyes were still on her face. She said, Your hands. Right. He stepped back. His hands dropped. Then from upstairs, through the ceiling, came a sound that was a small person encountering a large spider with considerable alarm. Hunter from the doorway mouthed something at her. Spider, she translated. Darren looked at the ceiling. He looked at her. He looked at the ceiling again. He went to handle the spider. Hunter looked at the empty doorway, looked at her, and said nothing, because some things do not require commentary. She pulled up the map. Tomorrow, they went east. They came from the east. Zack had told them west. He had told them dawn. He had been very certain and very convincing. She had watched his face the whole time. She had memorized the exact way a man looked when he believed he had the information that would destroy you, and then she had let him walk away with the wrong version of the plan. Now it was before dawn, and the eastern tree line, and everything was moving very fast. The battle was loud and dark, and she did not have the luxury of tracking all of it. Force field, telekinesis, fire in the spaces where she needed it, specific, controlled, never more than the situation needed. Hunters went down, her wolves held. She felt the blood moon pack link at the edges of her reach, the old signal she had lived inside for 18 years, and she pushed through it and told the blood moon wolves to stay clear of the east side. She saved Percy from 2 hunters who had him on the ground. He was bleeding from a cut along his ribs, and he looked up at her and said, I'm sorry, Kaiya, for everything, for all of it. She said, I know, go back. Someone took him. She turned. Then she felt the sharp pain in her side that was not her own wound. Her mate bond, the white Crescent pack link, Darren's specific thread in it, went wrong. A flash of something that was both his pain and her panic, and she was already running before she had finished processing what it meant. She found him in the council chamber off the back of the Great Hall. The Great Hall's double doors were open. She pushed through them and stopped. The hall was the same stone floor, the same high windows, the same carved council chairs, the same torches in the same iron brackets, throwing the same uneven light across the same space where 200 wolves had watched her be rejected 6 months ago. She stood in the center of it, and the room went quiet. Not because she did anything, not because she spoke, because she walked in with her hands bright and the diamond mark blazing, and everyone in that hall, blood moon wolves pressed against the walls, the remaining hunters, the council elders in their seats, every person caught in the middle of whatever had been happening, went silent the way rooms go silent when something has arrived that is too large to keep talking through. She felt them looking. She felt the specific quality of their attention, the same attention she had felt 6 months ago, the night of the ceremony, the same stone floor under her feet, and everything else was different. She did not lower her hands. Then Alaric's voice came from the council chamber doorway. So, our guest of honor has finally arrived. He stepped out. He was tall and blond and unhurried, and he had Darren in front of him, Darren with his hands bound and blood from a cut along his temple and his weight evenly distributed, because Darren did not know how to stand like a prisoner. He only knew how to stand like a man waiting for the moment. I was beginning to wonder. She looked at Darren. Darren looked at her. His face said, I see you. His face said, I am fine. His face said, do not do anything reckless, which, from him, was a little rich. Alaric was still speaking. He had a careful, unhurried quality that she recognized as the kind of confidence that came from believing you had already won. I know how strong a mate bond is, he said. He looked at her the way someone looks at a mechanism they have studied. It will kill you to see him hurt. He's dragging you down, Kaiya. He's the reason you'll fail. Why don't I just cut the dead weight? She was very still. Darren said, Do you really think you can kill her? His voice was even. He was looking at Alaric with the grey eyes that held nothing. She's stronger than you think. Alaric smiled. That is where you are wrong. When you try to take away the people she cares for, she fights even harder. Exactly, Darren said. Then something in her chest split open and closed again in the space of a single breath, sharp and sudden and over, the way things are when they are final. She knew what it was. She stood still and let it be done. Zack had made his choice. That was the whole of it. She breathed once. She raised her hands. The gun flew out of Alaric's hand. She did not think about it. Her attention went to the gun, and the gun moved across the chamber 20 feet, landing on the stone floor with a sound that was very loud in the silence. Alaric lunged. She raised her other hand, and a wall of heat rose between him and the weapon, not touching him, just there, warm and very clear about its position. He stopped. She walked forward. She put a force field around Darren. Fire at the edges. She had learned how to do this in the last 3 months. She had been learning everything she could find. And it settled around him like something that had always been there, warm and certain. He stood inside it and looked at her with the expression she had seen once in a hallway at midnight when they both held glasses of water and almost laughed. She turned to the hall. 200 people plus hunters along the walls, plus the council in their chairs. The same room, the same witnesses, the same stone floor she had walked across 6 months ago after accepting her rejection. She spoke clearly, without raising her voice, because she did not need to raise her voice. Zack Moon fed your location and patrol schedules to the hunters for 6 months. He told them to come early. He is the reason 7 blood moon wolves are dead. The hall was completely still. Brielle Summers carried that information. She told him your schedules. She told him where to aim. She looked at Brielle, who was standing near the far wall and had gone the very particular colour of someone who had believed they were invisible and now understood they were not. I am not going to kill either of them. She looked at Alaric. His face had the particular quality of someone recalculating. You are going to leave, she said. You are going to leave this territory, and every territory your organization has touched for 3 generations. And if you come back... She held his gaze for 1 full second, her hands still bright, the fire at Darren's force field steady and clear. You will find that the thing you were afraid of when you started hunting this bloodline was not wrong. Alaric looked at her hands. He looked at the hall around them. He looked at the hunters along the walls, some of whom had the particular stillness of people who were currently reassessing their life decisions. He left. No drama, no speech. He simply turned and walked out of the hall, and the hunters followed him, and the sound of their leaving was the specific relief of something ending. The council did not move. Brielle was escorted to the door. She did not look at Kaiya as she left. She did not look at anyone. She walked out of the hall alone, and Kaiya watched her go, and felt something she had not expected, not triumph, not grief, just the quiet of it. Someone she had grown up hating had become, finally, someone she used to know. The force field opened at its seams. Darren broke through it, not because it failed, but because it recognized him, the way things that were made for someone always recognize them. He crossed the chamber to her in the center of the hall, the same stone floor, and he stood in front of her. 200 blood moon wolves, the council elders in their carved chairs, the witnesses who had watched her be rejected by her hair in this room, Percy somewhere in the crowd, all of them watching. Darren said, "She was never the runt. She was always the queen." He had said it quietly, just to her. That was why it landed the way it did, because it was not a speech, not a proclamation, not something he had prepared. It was just true, stated out loud by someone who had always known it, in the place where it needed to be said. Then he bit the mark on her neck. She felt the mate bond complete, not as a new thing, as a thing that had been waiting, the way the fire had been waiting, the way all of it had been waiting, since the border and the 3 seconds and the diamond-burning silver against his hand. It moved through her chest and down her spine, and she felt it in her hands, the specific warmth of something finally allowed to be what it was, and it was warm and certain and completely irreversible. The council bowed. The elders in their carved chairs bowed. Percy, somewhere in the back of the crowd, went down on one knee. He looked at the floor because he could not look at her yet. That was fine. He had time to learn. The Blood Moon Pack bowed. She stood in the center of the stone floor with Darren's hands on her face, the same place he had put them the night before when he was checking for burns, and she thought, "I walked out of this room once. I walked back in." She did not say any of that out loud. She did not need to. The hall was full of people bowing to something they had been wrong about for 18 years. It was enough. 10 years. The reform decree had passed in the first year after the battle. The law was 3 sentences long, and it had taken 4 months of council meetings and a great deal of patience, and one occasion where she had sat in a meeting for 6 hours until the resistance simply ran out of things to say, and then it passed. No Omega could be publicly rejected without a formal council witness present and a 3-day review period. No pack could claim a wolf as property under the old bond law provisions. No wolf would be branded a rogue simply for crossing the border. The sanctuary at the White Crescent border, for packless wolves, for rogues who had never chosen to be rogues, for Omegas who needed somewhere to go, was named after her mother. She had stood at the naming ceremony and not cried, which she considered one of the more significant achievements of her adult life. Today, Addie was somewhere upstairs yelling about her phone. "Mom!" The voice had the particular quality of 15, not quite done being outraged. "Tell Pierce to give me my phone. I'm trying to talk to Lucas." Kaiya put down her cup of tea. She looked at the ceiling for a moment. She said, with the patience of someone who had been doing this for 10 years, "Pierce." A small face appeared in the doorway. Dark hair like his father's, blue eyes like hers, currently wearing what was supposed to be a formal tuxedo shirt and had somehow already achieved a state of maximum dishevelment. He was holding the phone with the complete innocence of someone who was not doing anything wrong and intended to continue not doing anything wrong indefinitely. "Give your sister her phone," she said. "I was just looking at it," he said. "You can look at your own phone." "Mine doesn't have games on it." She looked at him. He had the grace to look slightly guilty. He went upstairs. She heard the handover happen, and she heard Addie's voice soften immediately into the tone it took when Lucas was on the other end, and she sat back down with her tea and thought about nothing in particular for a moment. She was 2 months pregnant with Sierra. She had only told Darren 2 days ago, which had gone. "We have a situation." How big is this situation? About the size of a person. And then he had picked her up and spun her around, and she had told him to put her down, and he had not put her down for another 12 seconds, which was frankly longer than strictly necessary, but she had not objected very hard. Outside, the territory stretched green and full and familiar. The pack ran twice weekly now. The children trained separately in the mornings. The sanctuary sent 3 new wolves a month, and she knew most of their names. Addie appeared in the doorway. She had been upstairs changing. Her party was in 2 hours, and she had apparently concluded the outfit situation needed emergency revision. She was dressed in something blue and young and entirely appropriate, which she had chosen without asking for help, and she looked exactly like someone who had grown up knowing she was loved. "Do I look okay?" she asked. "You look beautiful," Kaiya said. "You have to say that." "I don't, actually. I just do." Addie went back upstairs. Pierce crashed into the doorframe on his way past, going nowhere in particular with the pure velocity of a 10-year-old boy, and Kaiya caught his collar and said, "Careful," and he said, I know, the baby," and she said, "The baby, and also the doorframe," and he went. She sat for a moment in the quiet. She had been sitting in kitchens and studies and hospital rooms and ceremony halls for 10 years, and she had never stopped being slightly surprised that there was always someone to come in and break the quiet, in a way she never once wanted to end. After the party, Addie found her in the kitchen. She was washing up the last of the dishes because she had always been better at stillness with something to do, and she heard Addie's footsteps on the kitchen floor and turned. Addie was looking at her with an expression she did not usually wear in public, open and certain and a little young, the face under the 15-year-old face. "Thank you, Mom," she said, "for everything." She crossed the kitchen. She put her arms around her and held on. "I love you. Even though you didn't give birth to me, you are still my mum, and always will be. I couldn't ask for better parents, so thank you for keeping me, for taking care of me, for just being here for me. Thank you for being my mum." Kaiya's arms tightened around her. Her throat was doing the thing her throat did when something true arrived that she had been carrying for so long it had started feeling like furniture. She did not let go for a long time. She did not say anything for a long time because there was nothing to say that would be larger than what Addie had already said, and she was old enough now to know that the right response to something large was just to hold it. Pierce crashed into both of them from the direction of the hallway, because he had apparently been running in the house again. She caught him with one arm. He said, "Oh, is this a hug?" and inserted himself without being invited, which was his general approach to most situations. Darren appeared in the kitchen doorway. He looked at the three of them, at whatever was on Kaiya's face, at Addie's expression, at Pierce, who was vibrating slightly with the effort of staying still for a hug. He looked at this, and he did not say anything, because he was a man who had learned over 10 years that some moments needed his voice, and some moments only needed him to be there. He stayed there. Some nights, she still woke reaching for the mate bond in the dark, not from fear, just needing to feel it, needing the specific warmth of it under her hand like a hand in return. It was always there. It had always been there since the day it completed, warm and certain and permanent. The scars were there too, the grief for the 7 wolves they had lost, the grief for Brielle, which was complicated and smaller than she had expected, and took a different shape every time she came across it. The nights Darren was quieter than usual, working through something she could feel through the bond but could not reach directly. The way she still, sometimes, without thinking, stood with her back to a wall. That was fine. Those were hers. She had stopped trying to get rid of them a long time ago. They had always said a wolf is only as strong as the pack that claims her. She had built her own. She looked at the three of them, Addie and Pierce and Darren in the doorway, and the warm weight of all of it, how imperfect it was, how accidental, how stubbornly hers, settled in her chest like something finally put down. It was enough. She was enough. She had always been enough.